On behalf of the Department of Interpreting and Translation of the University of Bologna, and endorsed by the international network TREC, I welcome you all to the fifth lecture of the 2020-2021 Food for Thought Lectures series. My name is Cesar Gonzalez. I am a PhD student at the University of Bologna. I am also the first officer of the Bertinoro Translation Society and a member of the MC2 Lab, which is hosting our department's public lecture series this year. So remember that our lectures will be split into two parts of 20 minutes each, with a pause of 5 minutes in between. Keep the camera and the microphone off. You may ask questions using the chat at any time, and we will forward them to our speaker at the end of the second part. So, our topic today is text complexity and translation difficulty. That is a classical topic into our discipline, but not always addressed from an empirical perspective. So text difficulty is important in translators training and also in the profession, because it may determine, for instance, price changes, but it is also relevant for cognitive research, because it is generally assumed that texts of different difficulties, whatever that means, may have different impacts in the cognitive processes of our informants. So in this talk, we will learn how task difficulty has a direct impact on human performance. The talk will review empirical studies on the role of text complexity in the translation process and discoveries related to written translation, side translation, and also post-editing. Today's speaker is Professor Sanjin Sun, whose work is extensive on translation difficulty using keylogging and also eye tracking as data collection tools. He received his PhD in translation studies from Kent State University. He is an associate professor of translation studies at Beijing Foreign Studies University in Beijing. He is a co-editor of the Chinese journal Translation Horizons and has co-authored 2 books in Chinese on translation and language studies. Of course, he has published several articles in journals such as Meta, Target, Perspectives, and Translation, Cognition, and Behavior. So, Professor Sun, thanks for being here. The floor is yours.
So, how do I maximize? Is it okay? Is it okay?
Yeah, everything is okay. So if you want, you can start. The floor is yours.
Okay. I'm very sorry for this. So it's my honor to give this talk, which is on text complexity and translation difficulty. So, in this talk, we'll cover the significance of this field, its history. I'll distinguish a few concepts, and then we will talk about a research framework and research methods and typology of research objects. And towards the end, I will share the findings of a few studies. So theoretically speaking, in TS, there are many important questions. Among the core questions, the first, what difficulties do translators encounter in their work? And what strategies and methods do translators use to overcome these difficulties? And to what extent do translators solve this problem, this difficulty? That is translation quality assessment. So in cognitive translation studies, Professor Munoz in 2014 listed 7 topics, including competence and expertise, mental load, and linguistic complexity, also advanced in translation research methods. And according to him, mental load is a construct of paramount importance for translation process research. So practically speaking, knowing the difficulty level of a translation task is important in translation pedagogy, translation accreditation, also is important for the language industry, such as pricing. And we all know expertise studies. In order to achieve expertise, deliberate practice is needed, and deliberate practice only occurs under the four conditions. One is the task must be of appropriate difficulty for the individual. So history in psychology, researchers have started to pay attention to workload and difficulty since the 1920s. In 1927, I think there is a paper on the measurement of task difficulty. Since the 1960s, in the fields of human factors and industrial psychology, the researchers have started to investigate mental workload. For example, the mental workload of pilots, and in order to increase safety and reduce errors, some errors in these fields can be fatal. So in translation studies, Wills in 1982 distinguished between 4 types of translation difficulty, and Professor Nord made similar distinctions, including text-specific difficulties, translator-dependent difficulties, pragmatic difficulties, and technical difficulties. And they adopted an analytical approach. And Campbell in 1999 published a paper entitled "A Cognitive Approach to Source Text Difficulty in Translation." I believe it's a landmark paper, and he suggested that difficulty can be interpreted in cognitive terms with the support of models of working memory and of language comprehension and production. So in 2009, Ethan investigated the translation difficulty level of some types of text, and he employed 3 indicators, including readability. And in the same year, Liu and Zhao tried to identify indicators that may be used to predict source text difficulty for interpreting. And since then, there have been many empirical studies. Concepts. So I've mentioned a few concepts like difficulty, cognitive effort, and according to Oxford OED, and difficulty has 2 basic meanings. One is it refers to something. It refers to something which is hard to carry out, deal with. Sorry.
Yes, you have to share your screen again.
Again, okay. Sorry. So, can you see this? Can you see my PowerPoint? Okay.
Yes.
Great. Thank you. The second meaning is the quality fact or condition of a thing being hard to deal with. For example, how did you perceive the difficulty level of this task? And accordingly, difficulty in translation refers to one, translation problem. Second, the extent to which cognitive resources are consumed by a translation task for a translator to meet objective and subjective performance criteria. So cognitive load refers to the amount of mental effort demanded by a task, and cognitive effort means the amount of mental effort put into a task by individual. For example, 60%, 90%, I did not do my best. So, the definition may be a bit circular, but I hope you see what I mean. So, generally speaking, load is greater than effort. But in our case, in the case of translation and interpreting, cognitive load often equals cognitive effort. So there are other synonyms such as mental load, mental workload, cognitive workload. So I believe difficulty is broader in meaning than cognitive load or effort. Research framework. So in translation process research, there are two essential questions. One is what makes a text difficult to translate. The other is how to measure and predict the difficulty degree of a translation task. So why measure? So in business, there is a famous quote: if you cannot measure it, you cannot improve it. So predict, we predict the difficulty level so that we can predict the model, the behavior and performance. Also, if we predict and model the behavior, we can predict the difficulty level. So there is a recent article by Professor Schaeffer and his colleagues entitled "Predictive Turn in Translation Studies: Review and Prospects." So they argue that there is a predictive turn. So this is a chart I produced a few years ago. So it's supposed to be a framework. We can see that sources of translation difficulty are divided into two groups: translation factors and translator factors, and they can be measured or identified. So the sources of translation difficulty, translation factors include readability or reading comprehension problems, and translation specific problems are also reverbalization or transfer problems. So translator factors concern translation competence and expertise, also called ability variables such as intelligence, cognitive style, working memory capacity, and affection or emotion. Also, I would like to add a third category called task and environmental factors such as task criticality, task novelty, time pressure, equipment used, and physical and psychological equipment environmental factors such as ergonomics and user experience. Text complexity or readability has been an important topic in the field of reading research since the 1920s. In 1935, Gray and Leary, based on a survey, compiled a list of 289 factors that may be related to readability. People have been developing readability formulas since then. To date, over 200 readability formulas have been published. And they find that the strongest indexes of readability are vocabulary difficulty and sentence length. So identifying translation problems. So there are a few types of methods. One is self-report, including verbalization, such as thinking aloud protocols and retrospective protocols, and also reflective journal analysis or diary analysis. And behavior analysis. So it refers to pausing and revising behavior recorded by keylogging, eye tracking, or screen recording. And error analysis, which is performance-based. Campbell and Hill in 1999 identified several areas of difficulty, including word low in prepositional content, complex noun phrases, and official terms and passive verbs. But there is a problem in this field. That is, we need to develop a process-oriented typology of translation problems. My student and I have been working on study, and we have encountered difficulty in finding a readily available typology of translation problems. Measuring mental workload. One is subjective measures, for example, reading skills and expert panel. Performance measures like translation quality assessment and time on task. And physiological measures like EEG and behavioral measures like pausing and recorded by eye tracking and keylogging. So this is a subjective reading skill, and I'm sure you all know about it. So I wanted to draw your attention to this method. It's called pairwise comparison. According to Wikipedia, it refers to comparing entities in pairs to judge which of each entity is preferred, and had a greater amount of some quantitative property. Pairwise comparison is related to the analytic hierarchy process, or HP, which is a structured technique for organizing and analyzing complex decisions based on mathematics and psychology. Pairwise comparison can be used to judge, for example, which text is more difficult by a group of people. And there are many software programs that adopt the HP approach. For example, expert choice. You may Google this software program. And if you have watched this movie, The Social Network, you might be familiar with this. It's a website, Face Mesh, and it's a pairwise comparison. Behavioral eye tracking and key logging. Eye tracking records the number of fixations, fixation durations, attentional switching, and scan path similarity. Key logging, we all know translog and input log. Also, Professor Carr and his colleagues have developed a TPRDB, a translation process research database, which is very influential. To predict the difficulty level, first we need to find a valid and reliable method for after the fact measurement of difficulty for the individual. That is after the translation measurement. Second, we need to find an objective and automatic way to predict the workload independent of individuals, like a readability formula. So it has been recommended to use machine learning approaches to predict the quality, efficiency, and productivity of translation. But I have to mention that this approach might require a large number of data points. Some people mentioned a million data points. Research objects. So I developed this typology of research objects last year. It includes 3 layers. The bottom layer is mode of translation. The middle layer consists of 4 blocks: translation subtasks, text factors, task constraints, and the translator factors. Top layer includes some concepts and research objects such as cognitive effort, problem solving, and pauses, metacognition, uncertainty, emotion, memory, and others. So mode of translation process research has been conducted in written translation, site translation, machine translation, and post editing, also interpreting, and computer aided translation, audiovisual translation, and others. So the middle layer, 4 blocks. The first block, translation subtasks, including reading, drafting, seeking information, and revision. We know that there are researchers focusing on only a subtask of translation. For example, reading, seeking information. Text factors, including translation directionality, including, for example, L1 translation, L2 translation. Text type, like a literary text, specialized text, and linguistic and conceptual features of text that a researcher can focus on, such as cohesion and some potential problems like metaphors. And task constraints are factors that we can manipulate. For example, access to reference resources and tools, also time pressure, and translator factors like translation competence and interpretive levels, personality, and other individual differences. Some findings. machine translation, the difficulties in machine translation are different from what we human translators experience. For example, here there is a word sense disambiguation for machine translation. So challenges for neural machine translation they are different from written translation. And in written translation, for example, Professor Shreve and I, we found that translation difficulty level and text readability were weakly related, which means that text readability only partially accounted for its translation difficulty level. A post-translation questionnaire survey showed that over 70% of the informants reported that reverbalization or transfer in their target language was more difficult for them than source text comprehension. And Liu Zheng and Zhou explored the impact of text complexity on translators' subjective perception, translation difficulty, and on their cognitive load. They found that text complexity measured by readability and word frequency was in line with the results received from the informant's subjective assessment of difficulty. Also, they found moderate correlation between most items in the self-assessments and their objective indicators obtained by eye tracking measurements. And Jia, Carl and Wang, they compared post-editing and from scratch translation and found that post-editing was significantly faster than from scratch translation for domain-specific text. And post-editing significantly reduced the participants' cognitive effort. So I know I'm not being fair. There are simply too many interesting studies for me to review in this talk, and I was thinking of compiling a bibliography on translation difficulty research, and you may email your works related to this topic to me, and I will share this bibliography with you in time. Also, I think toward the end, I would mention that translation difficulty research is an interesting and emerging field. I hope you will agree. And that's it. Thank you very much. So again, I apologize for my delay.
Professor Sun, thank you very much for being here. We are really very fortunate to have you as a member of the MCD Lab. We have now some questions that we would like to answer. I believe that people may be writing them into the chat. So if you have any questions, just write it in the chat. I will yes, I will start with one question. and it's the following. Are there parameters that can be used across languages? That is, are there indicators of possible text complexity that can be applied to very different languages, such as, for instance, Chinese and also to Italian?
Okay, thank you for the question. And Professor Campbell in 1999, in their article, mentioned that there are indeed some factors that can be applied to different languages. So some difficulties are, I think, maybe universal. For example, some abstract words are maybe very difficult to translate, and long sentences might be one, and they might cause more cognitive load, and some maybe some difficult concepts, abstract concepts might be also be one.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have another one from the MC2 lab. It is that the following. So readability formulas have been criticized because they have no theoretical basis. They are just the result of back engineering. Do you think choosing a number of parameters and offering their values separately could help compare text from different research projects?
I think indeed they are back engineered, and but they are useful. They are very useful. And we actually, I think, in translation process research, some researchers are adopting the same way for developing a readability formula. We are also using reverse engineering.
Yeah, thank you. We have two more. Well, this is kind of easy. Micaela Abdul Mikasa is asking if he can have the PowerPoint after the lecture.
No problem. Of course.
Okay. I'm sorry for the pronunciation. Zoe or Joe is asking that you mentioned translator factors in translation difficulty. Can you give some details about such factors?
Translator factors include, I think, translation competence and expertise levels. Also, some maybe some personal factors like working memory capacity, like a personality, affective or emotion side, like that, I think.
Thank you. And I believe that we have a last one, also from the MC2 lab. It is the following. How did you envision the relationship between text complexity that seems to point to general tendencies and difficulty, which seems to be very personal, very individual?
Thank you. It's an excellent question. I think text complexity is objective, and difficulty. Yes, difficulty is a bit subjective. But there are a few, I think, assumptions in translation difficulty research. That is, if a text is more difficult than the other to one translator, it's it probably so for another translator. And if a text is difficult to do a translator, maybe last year, and it tends to be also tends to be more difficult than the other, maybe in a few years. So, and text complexity is a factor coding difficulty.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I am giving you a couple of announcements. As Ricardo said, the first one is that the applications for the summer school on cognitive translation studies are open until May the 1st. So we still have like 16 days left. So spread the word, because this will be the first summer school. Right now will be online. There is also another lecture, but from a different series, tomorrow, Friday, at 10 a.m. in Ohio, the United States. Here in Europe, it's 4 p.m. Professor Josh Morkens will give a talk on ethics and neural machine translations as part of the series of Crit Translation Colloquium. And finally, on May 13th, we have our closing session by 3 speakers. Álvaro Marín, who will speak about the making of translation experts. Professor Sandra Halverson, with a lecture called First, Fast and Frequent, What Makes Some Translation Choices Easy. And Professor Ricardo Muñoz, who will close our series of lectures and will give us some final remarks. There will be a Q&A session that will adopt a format of a round table between the speakers and the audience, so it will be very nice and very interesting. Thanks a lot, save the dates, and have a nice day.